it's alive. Hello folks, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. And in this video we're going to start the engine of Old Rusty for the very first time. And believe me, I have not started it, I have not tested it. You are the ones seeing it for the first time. I don't know if it's going to start. I know we've done a lot of work on it, but things can always go wrong. Maybe it's going to leak, maybe it's going to break, maybe it's not going to start at all. Although we've done all the measurements that we could take to make sure that everything has been assembled properly. But then again, it's mechanics and things can go wrong. And if they do go wrong, we'll try to fix it in this video until we get the engine to run. But before we crank it up, a few details. First of all, the battery. Now this is a 12 volts battery. However, the starter motor is a 6 volt starter motor. And I'm going to still use 12 volts to try to crank it up for the first time. So applying 12 volts to a 6 volt starter is always a bit of a challenge, I would say. Now some people claim it doesn't do no harm, other people say it does do harm. Well, reality is that the windings are not going to be destroyed on the motor. The motor will spin faster, that's a given. However, the part that will get damaged or could get damaged is the front cap here. This may actually crack because the bendix will fly out much faster and far more violently, and it will hit the back part here and it could crack this housing. It also may destroy the spring inside and the bendix itself. So these are a few points to watch out for if you're going to use 12 volts on a 6 volt starter. But for this purpose, it is not much of an issue because I'm just going to do it very shortly, and later on I will replace it with a 6 volt battery. I'm just reusing an old oil can for my gas tank, and I hooked it up to my fuel pump. Now the fuel pump has been reconditioned before, so if you want to see that, then check out that video. We'll have to prime the engine, I have to prime the fuel pump, I have to prime also the carburetor, because all that has been rebuilt and is totally empty. And that's why you see this gas tank a little bit sitting higher up, because it makes it easier for the fuel to flow. We also rebuilt the carburetor, we changed the float, we changed the float needle valve, a lot of seals, so this carburetor should be now good. But of course, it's not adjusted at all. I have not hooked up any cables yet, so the choke should be over here, so I will have to do this manually, and then the throttle is on this side right here. So hopefully that will all work out just fine. I just don't know, we'll see, I'll have to play with it when we're trying to crank it up. I have pre-timed the distributor in a previous video, and we have now cabled up the ignition coil and many of the other parts, so now that should be ready to go. Hopefully the timing point is right, but we'll find out very soon if we're trying to start it. So in this funny part that you see right here, this is actually a hose which is a bypass for the radiator. I don't have my radiator ready yet. It's not available. It's still in a rebuilt condition, and the guy had some delays because of COVID. Nevertheless, so I'm still going to try it with a bypass. So I'm feeding water that normally goes into the radiator back into the water pump. Now, this is what I call a closed loop circuit, and that is not a good solution for running for a longer time on this engine, because for two reasons. First of all, you're not going to get the proper cooling, and secondly, you're going to build up pressure because water expands. And if water expands, you have to let the pressure go a bit. That's why you have a pressure relief valve on the top of your normal radiator. Now here I can't, I have no relief valve, so that's not going to be very good. But then again, I'm not going to let the engine run very long, so that should be no problem. So a test like this is always okay for a short run. So the next thing we need to do now is to make sure that the engine is properly oiled. So when I put the engine together, I paid special attention to oil everything as much as I could and to grease everything. Obviously all the oil channels in the block and in the crankshaft are not filled up with oil. So I don't want to start the engine without oil in all these channels. So at least not having a running engine, if it even runs. But therefore I'm going to crank up the engine first with having the spark plugs removed and just run it on the starter motor, making sure it can't start or ignite by itself, and then check that the oil channels are actually being fed with oil from the oil pump, and we'll measure the oil pressure. For me that is very important because that will give me the assurance that everything is okay, or at least everything has been greased and oiled properly. So let us remove first of all the spark plugs. I already have removed 3 spark plugs, so now I'm going to remove my last one. And the reason I'm doing that is because it's so much easier for the starter motor to rotate the engine without that compression on it. And while these spark plugs are out of the engine, I will also measure the compression on every cylinder to see if we actually have compression. We'll take an input to the starter motor, and let's see if it's going to crank up or not. That's exactly what I wanted to see. So I'm going to do this a couple of times just to make sure that the oil channels are filled up. Whoops. Now that's a bad ground, you see that? And that is almost like melting down this wire. And that's because I have a bad ground here. So I got to make sure that I remove this. Now that we have kind of primed the oil channels, I'm going to check if I actually have oil pressure coming out of the oil pump, and sufficient oil pressure. And this is an external oil feed coming from the camshaft channel, and the camshaft is fed by the oil pump, and it's coming up all the way to the top here to oil the tumblers and the valves and so on. So I'm going to remove this and then check out how much pressure I have here, and I should see something like 2 kilograms or 2 bar, because that's what we kind of measured last time when we reconditioned the oil pump. And I can see there's already oil inside, so oil has already been flowing through that system, so that's a good thing. And I can see there's oil coming out of it, which is a good sign. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to rotate the engine and measure the pressure right here, because that's where the oil feed is for the camshaft. Hopefully I won't be in the way, guys. So I'm going to hold a pressure meter in here because I don't have the proper adapter, and then we'll see. You see the oil coming out, and I'm not holding it properly. And you see that I have actually 2 kilograms. Did you saw that? And you can see the oil coming out. So I know that my oil pump is working really well. So we noticed a 2 bar oil pressure, and that's good. So now I'm going to reconnect the oil pipe, and then we will do a compression test. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is to measure the compression for each and every cylinder, and for that you need a compression meter, and hopefully you can see it. So let me place it here, and we'll try to focus on it so you can actually see the actual compression. Now remember, this is compression now, not with the full carburetor open. The carburetor is actually closed, so I expect around 8 to 9 kilograms. I would say that 10 kilograms is a good compression for an old engine like this. These were low compression engines, so I'm happy with that. And now I'm going to test each single cylinder. So I tested all 4 cylinders, and they all sit between 9.5 and 10 kilograms. So that's a pretty good result. So that's good. I also know that my oil pressure is good. I had 2 kilograms just starting it on the starter motor, which is good. So now it's time to fill up the engine with cooling liquid, and I'm going to use protective cooling liquid for that. So let me remove this hose here, and then we can fill that up with cooling liquid. And then we should almost be ready to crank it up after we filled up the gasoline tank. That seems to be already full. And now I need to put the hose back up. I know I still have some air in it, in the hose here, but that's okay. It will pump it around. I think I will open this up for now, and then try to fill a bit more in from this side. So at least the hoses are a bit more filled up, because it's not like a normal radiator. They can top it up. It's a bit more difficult like this. Okay. Oh, that's better. All right. Yeah. Okay, dokie. So we're getting near to the moment of truth. So let's refuel and see what happens. And after I have the fuel in the canister, I will prime the fuel pump and the carburetor, and then we give it a try. I'm going to leave that open, otherwise it's going to suck vacuum. So I'm going to prime the fuel pump now. And once the fuel is into the carburetor, I'm going to crank the engine a couple more times, and I start feeling some resistance. And I can hear it on the carburetor as well, so that's good. Alright, so let's see on the carburetor how things are. So I primed the fuel pump, the carburetor has now fuel as well. So I'm going to move it to the choke position, although I have no cable. But I'll leave the spark plugs out, and I'm going to crank it a few times with the choke open, so we get some fuel at least inside the cylinders. And I'm not going to do it continuously. So, I guess the engine now has all the vital elements it needs. It has gasoline. We know the gasoline is into the carburetor. We have the battery. We have ignition. We have compression. We have oil. And we have cooling liquid. So, I think we can give it a try. So, what do you think? It's going to crank. It's going to brake. It's not going to crank. It's going to burn up. It's going to explode. Whatever. Well, maybe I shouldn't show it in this video. No, I will. Let me try. Whoops. That was an interesting flame work. Wow. Interesting. Let's try again. Well, we almost got it, right? So let's try a little bit more and see what happens. Let me see if I can open up the throttle a bit. So let me try to give it a bit more throttle. Now I'm giving a bit of throttle. I have the choke up, so let's see what it does. And of course, I don't know what the idle mixture screw is at this moment in time, so I'm going to turn that in as much as I can and then turn it out just about 2 full turns. Okay, that should be about good. We'll see. Let's give it another try. Wow, this it's getting there, right? All right, so I still need to work a bit on the carburetor to make sure that it has sufficient gas on idle, because it doesn't for the moment. Let's start again. So folks, believe it or not, but this was truly an initial start, and it fired up almost immediate. You've seen that the carburetor had some issues still. I still need to make some adjustments on that, but we knew that because this is not the original carburetor. But for the rest, it's running smoothly. I see no leaks anywhere for the moment. Of course, we didn't run it very long. There's no water leaks anywhere around, so that's all good. I see a little bit of an oil leak right here behind the flywheel, and I know where that is. I probably need to take the flywheel back off and then tighten that seal a bit more, because I didn't tighten it enough, I think. But besides that, it works like a champ. And that's just most likely because I paid a lot of attention while I was assembling this engine. So now it runs. I'm going to put it aside now and continue on the rest of Old Rusty. So thank you for viewing, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I know this may sound unbelievable that it cranked up immediately, but it did. Thank you for viewing, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye.